Kennedy thought that he was going to be here, but I guess not. So we're going to move. Any of you have anything that you would like so other people can hear you? Have anything they'd like to say, or are you just here to listen? All right, for everybody else to know.
Guys, I'm John Gorski, resident of a zoning and planning issue. And kind of maybe a loophole or a couple of loopholes or a couple of are kind of, and it's something that's kind of developed. America's coolest small town, attracting people who are willing to invest a lot more money to build in our town. And set this forward project or projects. A couple of weeks feet away from my house that I didn't realize. Okay, I was gone in November. Project, which was it flew under my radar. Okay, and I came down and talked to Mike, just to find out what was going on. I do have a view property, and it's precious. I care for it a lot, and I just wanted to find out if it was going to be an issue, and it's not. It isn't an issue for me. Okay, I want to make that clear. But I didn't know that until I came down and talked to Mike, and I asked what was going on and what was going to be built and what's the scope of it, and like everybody who has a view property, I wanted to know how tall it was. Okay, so what I was wondering immediately was the height of the building measured from the grade, the natural grade of the property, or was it measured from this new site work? And as it turns out, with our zoning, because it is just nebulous and it's never really been identified, the building height is measured from the top of the new grade work. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's pretty significant. I would say it's very significant. Okay? Which, and again, I don't want to talk about a particular project. I'd rather just talk about the whole town, because this is possible everywhere. A town on a hill. And if a person is to bring in fill and build on top of the fill, and then build the maximum height building on top of that, the net result is a building and an obstruction. You don't want to call a beautiful building an obstruction, but a view obstruction, which is taller and larger than the comprehensive plan and all of the input that came from the public over the decades. I've been at most of those meetings about building heights. And for years, it's been about protecting view shed. But there's other issues, protecting solar rights. If somebody below a house that has a solar panel array on their roof builds up, brings in a bunch of fill, and then builds on top of it, they can block the sun from a solar array. With a building that still is the right height, it's just that they've raised the whole lot. Mm-hmm. A lot of the lots in town are tiny. They're a quarter of an acre or less. And this is the second loophole that makes this whole thing scary, is the city of Grand Marais, for some reason, and it's just practicality, and it never came up, there's nobody to blame, allows 1,000 yards of fill to be brought in without a permit. Okay? The county, on the other hand, requires permitting at 10. 1,000 yards is 100 full-size construction dump trucks. On a quarter-acre lot or a third-acre lot or an eighth-acre lot, we have those, a person could dramatically raise the grade of an entire lot. And because views are so valuable right now in the coolest town, small town in America, it's becoming financially viable to do these things. And it's going to become more financially viable as the years go by. And right now, I just think it's an accident, and I think it just opened up. And I think we could close the door right now by adopting a couple of the measures like the county and most places already have, which is to measure the height from the original grade. Okay? And I really think that's more in line with what people thought when they came and talked to everybody over the years about, you know, building heights and comprehensive plan ideas. You know, so that's,
So the two, if I was going to summarize the two concerns you have, one is the measurement from original grade versus modified grade, and then the second one would be the amount of fill that's allowed to be
Right.
brought in without.
I mean, the amount of fill is ridiculous.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
You know, in a residential district, to be able to, you know, and they don't have to ask Mike. You know, they can give them a building plan, and they can do a site drawing. I just did it, you know, when I did my addition here a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. And I didn't, you know, give you an elevation, I don't think, but they give you where the house is. It doesn't say how much higher above grade that house is gonna be, you know? And 1,000 yards, that is
That's a lot.
unbelievable amount of fill on a residential lot.
Okay.
And it's just an old thing that hasn't been updated, but I think the time has come to kind of close that.
Yeah, so I've got that, I've got those notes on those two things.
Yeah.
We'll advise the planning and zoning to take a look at that and see
Yeah.
what they come up with that. So,
Okay.
thanks for bringing it up with them.
Have a candy heart.
Yeah, there's
already
lots
did.
of candy hearts.
Okay, good. Thanks,
And
John.
you guys, I see you have stormwater issue coming up.
Yeah,
When you build the grade of the lot up, there's a significant stormwater issue that can be created at the same time.
yeah, it's
Just
true.
a thought.
Thanks, John. Anybody else have anything you want to say? You guys are here for other things? All right, with that, then we'll close the open forum. I will move on to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda has the typical three things: the approving this agenda, the previous meeting minutes, and then the payment of bills. Keeping in mind that we do have some additional bills on the printout that was provided to us for the community design group. One change to the agenda that I'd like to make is to remove the liquor store update. Chris said that he needed a little bit more time to get the information together so that he could present a thorough presentation to us about how things have been going with the Sunday sales and everything else at the store. So we'll see him next meeting, which is good because Tim wanted to be there. But now I remember that Tim said he wasn't going to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna remove that one, and we're gonna move on to, we'll just scratch that one. So that's what we have for the consent agenda. Unless somebody wants to take something out to discuss, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd approve the consent agenda as modified.
Okay, there's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's just three of us. Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, carries. So now we're going to move on to Highway 61. So you guys, come on up. You should probably introduce yourselves so that everybody who's watching, all 12 of them, know who you are, and then we can jump in and go from there. There's probably more than 12. I can actually check. Yeah.
It's Valentine's Day, Jim.
Cool, thank you. You thought of me.
Always. How do you tell how many
I guess
people are watching?
maybe a quick introduction. My name's Michael Kallenbach, project manager with MnDOT out of the Duluth office. involved in multiple projects in the district, but in particular the one here on 61 going through Grand Marais.
Chris Heinecker with SCH, managing this current process we're working through and developing the layout for the project.
David Larson, landscape architect with MnDOT's Office of Environmental Stewardship out of St. Paul.
CJ Fernandez, landscape architect with Ani Fernandez Landscape Architects.
So maybe just to tee it up a little bit, our plan tonight was, Michael's going to speak a little bit to the municipal consent process, kind of what that looks like, part of why we're here tonight. I'll just do a little kind of transition. CJ is going to walk through materials, kind of the latest information, and then open it up to questions, conversation with the council, and just talk about a couple next steps at the end.
Perfect.
So part of the process that we've got here is we work through, we're working with the committee on developing a layout, something that was acceptable to the city. That's what we're after. So as part of that process, we've got something that we consider, it's called municipal consent that is required. Municipal consent is required if one of three things take place in an urban setting like this where we're going to make changes. And it's a published document under municipal consent, MnDOT. And when is it required? It's required to come to council for resolution when we alter access. That means changing driveway locations. Driveway widths, I think, is not required, but if we're closing any driveways or moving them significantly, require municipal consent from the community. If we're adding any traffic lanes, if we were adding additional travel lanes through town, which we're not, but if we had been, that would also require it. And also any acquisition of right-of-way, whether it's permanent drainage easements or other items, which we will have within the project limits. That requires us to follow the municipal consent process. So what does that look like, and from a timing perspective? So step one is we develop a layout, and we will submit. We'll be leaving a copy of the layout here tonight with Mike, and we will be generating basically a cover letter that goes along with that to Mike, requesting that the city hold a public hearing for folks to come and provide input. And there's some time requirements that are associated with that. So I would expect in the next couple of days that cover letter will be sent to Mike, and then there'll be a 30-day notice that will have to be posted. And prior to the meeting here, working with Mike, it looks like the public hearing would likely be February 28th. March 28th, sorry, yeah. March 28th, the same night as the second council meeting in March. So, and at that time, what we would be looking for is consent from the community, from the council. And with that, we consider that layout drawing approved by the community, and we proceed into final design. So when we the exhibits that you see tonight, the line work, the areas where there is parking, where there isn't parking, I mean, that's what we're looking for approval on, is that layout. But it's not final design. There'll be areas where we will have to, potentially work with property owners to make minor revisions. But overall, we know how many travel lanes there are going through town, which blocks we're going to have parking on, what the lane widths are, parking widths are, bump out locations for pedestrian safety and reducing crossing widths in town. So that's kind of what we're after with the municipal consent process. But after tonight, we would have, we'll be advertising for a public meeting, which is different from the public hearing. A public meeting where folks will have the opportunity to review what's presented tonight and offer comments to us, to the design staff. And then the next time that we would be back to the city would be at the end of March 28th, with anticipation of getting approval.
Okay, so if I were to summarize what you just said, I always like to do this because then it makes me know if I got it or not.
Sure.
So basically, the geometry of the project, so where the curbs are, how far the parking lanes, what the driving lanes are, where the turn lanes are, where the bump outs for pedestrians are, all that stuff is what the initial municipal consent agreement, that's what that approves.
Yes.
So behind the curb amenities and things like that are things that still can be changed. There still can be a change to some aspects of the design based on property owners and things like that. But it's just the basic structure of this is how we're going to throw things in there
Yes.
is what we're looking for agreement on.
Yep.
And then March 28th, we're going to do, you said that was the public hearing.
Correct.
And then,
March 28th.
yep, and then that's when we'll vote on consent. And then after that, we'll do a public meeting, which is when people can come and,
Yeah, so that's
Okay,
the order
that's where I
I
was
stated it.
getting
I
a little
stated
bit-
it in that order, but actually February 27th
is going to be the public meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I had it clear.
So we're going to host an open house here in this room, February 27th.
Yep.
Probably 3:30 to 5:30. Where it won't be a presentation. We'll have the plans laid out. We'll have some video fly-through views, and there'll be MnDOT.
Yeah.
Maybe we should. Yeah, we'll come up with some new treats. We'll have some MnDOT staff here, and we'll have some steering committee members here to speak with anybody who has questions or wants to provide any input. And we'll be advertising that, and so will MnDOT in the upcoming days.
Cool. Yep. All right. Just wanted to make sure I got that right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Continue.
So before handing it over to CJ, I want to provide just a little more context of the efforts that we've been focusing on over the past several months. After working with the steering committee, the community steering committee, for several months, MnDOT, around last summer, expanded their technical team to continue to work closely with the steering committee to look, I'll call a little bit more broadly at the overall study corridor and beyond the curb lines, how the project will kind of integrate, interrelate with the adjacent land uses. So that's where the focus has been over the past 3 to 5 months. That started with a meeting with the steering committee in September where we spent 3 hours just going end to end on the corridor, kind of understanding issues, priorities, concerns of that group. And then we followed up with a meeting in November to kind of show the revised plans, get some more feedback, and then in January we met with that group a third time. And at the end of that meeting, there was a general agreement amongst the committee members that things are ready to move forward to the city council, which brings us to tonight. So any questions about the process? Okay.
I'll just mention that process, the meetings that he just mentioned were very, very productive. and we look forward to continuing those keeping things productive like that, so keep moving forward. It's pretty exciting stuff.
So we're going to have CJ walk through the latest plans, and then I think from a time standpoint, it's at your discretion, but he could maybe run through his materials. And as he noted to us previously, as you see more of the materials, you can probably get some of your questions answered. And then at the end, we're here to answer any questions you have. So.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting the lights.
Perfect. That's it.
Well, thank you for having us here and allowing us opportunity to kind of explain the work. Where I wanted to pick up with was that geometric plan we were just discussing, which is the focus of the municipal consent. I'm going to spend very little time with this, but I simply want it. Picture's worth 1,000 words to me, and it helps me understand what that means. The geometric plan is essentially the core or the spine of the new road design. And moving forward here in the next month through our meetings, the consent is trying to achieve a consent on this plan. And so all the renderings you'll see after this build off of this. The sidewalks are in the same place, the road's in the same place. Where our work is focused, as Chris mentioned, is sort of in and outside of what you see colored here, which is pavement of the road, the lanes, curb, trail, and sidewalk. And so our process has shaped this plan itself, as well as informed how this plan could tie into the existing environment on private properties. And as we all know, it's a complex project with a lot of nuances and property ownership. But I simply wanted to show you, graphically, this is the basis of the municipal consent, and the work that I'm showing after this uses the same line work, but it shows plantings, additional hardscaping areas, what we've been referring to as amenity features, and there's a process moving forward into final design where determinations will be made on what is in the project and what is out. So just kind of a quick graphic on what that geometric plan is. For the rendered plan, my intention is to walk through the corridor. I'll probably walk through a little bit more briefly than we've done in our last meetings, but if there's reason to stop, let's do that. Otherwise, I'll move through. The plans have been updated after every meeting that we've had and updated after the last meeting. And the animation that we had shown has been updated as well. A lot of the questions, in my opinion, about what you're seeing on plan are kind of answered in the animation. It does a good job of depicting what we're looking at in plan view. So, again, we can discuss items if needed. Otherwise, we'll walk through this and get to the animation, and then we can, continue the conversation about the plan. So starting at 8th, just a quick primer. Areas that you see, hatched like this, those are amenity locations. They are not in the project. They're sort of added features. And there's a number of sites that we've looked at. And part of our strategy, this came out of the process and speaking with steering committee and some of our past experience working on the visioning portion of this project, hasn't been so much to introduce banners and a bench and establish sort of a more prototypical streetscape. There's been this interest in a slightly more eclectic corridor that has a personality and uniqueness that continues and evolves as you move from one end to the other. There are spaces throughout the corridor that we looked at for potential enhancements, and there's small gathering places, a place to sit, park your bike, so on and so forth, an overlook. And so that has been the strategy behind the design. And those are all items that will get teased out again after the municipal consent.
And those items are items that we're considering using the TAF funding that we've secured for developing those, as well as other partnerships and things.
Correct. Yep. So here, a couple things to note. This is we'll look at all of these in greater depth, but we've referred to these as community space, and this is the 8th Avenue Campground Entry Monument. It brings a little more enclosure to the road, helps with speeds, but also brings some amenity and resting opportunities. We're showing a median, whether it's raised or flush is to be determined, but we're showing, in this plan, we're showing that median is kind of that white paving change that runs down the center line. Parking extends up 61 on both sides of the road. This curb line from past versions has moved out for a couple reasons. One is to make the cross slopes ADA accessible, so we don't have a tilted kind of cross pitch to our sidewalks. The other is there's a stone mortared wall here, and as we have moved the curb away, we can manipulate the grades to hopefully save all of that wall. So there's a couple reasons that evolved that way. As we move down the hill, the next community space is what we've called the landing overlook. It's what we would call a mixing zone, sort of off of the pathway, and it's a space that pulls out and it's elevated with a stairway down. It looks over the campground and out over the bay, and it's kind of a confluence point. One other thing I'd mention is our plans now are accounting for a full 12-foot wide trail back of curb, with the intention that the existing trail would be removed during this project. The trail continues down to 5th. At 5th, we have bump out locations on both sides that use pedestrian crossing to close and bring in more enclosure on the street, change the width of the street, helps manage traffic speeds as well as bring awareness to pedestrians, the painted crosswalks, and plantings as well. We've looked at multiple locations and given ideas where public art could happen throughout the corridor as well. That campground monument is essentially equivalent to that. This was another location where that could happen as well. As we continue to 4th Avenue, there's another bump out location for crossing here, which narrows up, making a safer crossing. As we move towards 3rd Avenue, we have the turn lanes onto Wisconsin. This is boxed out. It's a potential pavement enhancement. In looking at the corridor, we've looked at sort of the corridor center, or the core or center of the corridor is this 3rd to Broadway area, and these become essentially bookends where there may be an enhanced pavement. It could be a paver, it could be colored concrete, it could just be scored differently. So it has a bit different shape to it than is shown in the geometric plan, but it's bringing extra attention to a pedestrian environment backed up by plantings as well at that location. As we move on through the corridor, the 12-foot multi-use trail continues on the south side of the road with 6-foot concrete sidewalks on the north side and planted boulevards. As this trail transitions through this more kind of urban cross-section, we've looked at maintaining areas for plantings, really to create an edge to that trail for safety reasons, but also to create a better environment of not having the trail butting up against parking lots. So we have an enhanced experience. In this location, there's a shortage of space, and so the sidewalk actually moves to back of curb and goes to 8 foot in width. This shows essentially a redesign of that private property to show how the plan could be reworked, or how the plan could work with the private property owner. And this has evolved through our process as well, but they have a functional backing out parking area and a walkway in front of the business where things are stored and people come into the buildings currently. At the library, the old Gunflint Sign Trails, Dairy Queen, and Visitor Center, this was an evolution from the last meeting where we got comments about an enhanced paving surface equivalent to what we're at the corners of Broadway and 3rd as sort of being the center of the core and a major pedestrian crossing. That's shown, kind of depicted in the terracotta or red location. There are streetlights that are located throughout the corridor specifically for pedestrian and driver kind of experience reasons. It's not for lighting purposes. And we'll show you what the detail of the lights are. They're pedestrian scale. And we're bringing some more verticality to the corridor, which helps with driver awareness to pedestrians, as well as bring a little more enclosure on the road. There's parking, on-street parking, kind of throughout all of these blocks. The 12-foot trail continues, as well as a 6-foot sidewalk. We've also shown some enhanced site development here, creating a green essentially at the signs. The signs are amazing and a community asset. We think that it's a great candidate for a little refreshing and sort of bringing that into the corridor design. As we continue past First, here we have a situation where it's extremely constrained. And we do have some flexibility in the trail, and so through our last meetings, we made a determination that we'd keep a healthier planted boulevard and shrink the trail to a 10-foot width, which still functions as a multi-use trail up to Broadway. So from this location to here, that trail narrows down to 10 feet. This is at the pharmacy, and Huey's Tacos is this location, and Holiday Gas. We've showed a different condition here for the on-street parking because of its sort of more temporary nature and potential for higher frequency of stops. We've looked at plantings, more so in containers in the pavement, if that makes sense, and easier access to get into the pharmacy. There's also an ADA ramp provided for it to get up to the front door and a direct access stair. When we'll show some other kind of the enhancements that could happen within the streetscape design and that the model rendering as well. And so at Broadway, we are kind of at the other end of the core bookend. And so again, we have an enhanced paving, slightly different shapes, and to mark out and kind of create that continuity through those spaces in the corridor. As we continue to move east, the trail then crosses Broadway and then switches to the north side of the road and onto the course of the existing trail. And so the two essentially flip-flop, where the 6-foot concrete walk then goes to the south side of the road, and this matches up with existing trail. And moving east from here, corners are replaced and rebuilt, and then the trail, as well as driveways, but the trail in a lot of this section is remaining as is. Curb or edge of road is remaining as is as well. And the 6-foot sidewalk, a few other items to note are bump out locations at First and again at Second. This is another community space opportunity at the post office. We had done some earlier sampling a couple years back. This is a major destination for people, for local residents. We had the idea of looking at this as a mail carrier's memorial or memorial to the old dog trail. It kind of came out of an idea of the memorial plaque that's at the Hovland Dock, which specifically talks about the connection of the dog trail from Grand Marais to Hovland. And it seemed like a good opportunity in a space where that could happen. It also provides just some sheltered space for some bike racks to be placed as well. As we continue east, at 3rd Avenue, this is where the street closure is happening. And through our process, it was determined that the best use here was essentially a municipal parking area that can serve adjacent businesses. That's also coupled with a small gathering space with bike racks, the potential for kiosk for wayfinding and other information, as well as opportunities for public art. And as people progress into town from the east, headed westbound, it starts to provide a change in character that's happening naturally as you progress to the Gunflint and keep moving westbound from there. The enclosure of the plantings and built vertical features along the edges of the road start to tell the drivers that they're moving into a different environment. So as we continue east past Subway, the trail continues, this being existing trail, and then the new sidewalk running up to the Gunflint Trail intersection. Another change that was made from the last time we were here was the staging area for left turns was increased in size based on feedback that we had gotten about truck staging and other issues related to snow plowing, being able to provide free flow on the through lanes. Are there any comments or questions at this point?
I have a question. It didn't seem to me that there was a left turn lane at the park. There is now, and it looked to me like there wasn't one.
At the campground?
There is.
At the campground, is there one?
Yeah, there's a median that creates that,
Okay.
that creates that
This
left
picture,
turn.
that's outside the scope of this project.
Right
Right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or there is a left turn, okay.
So the distance in front of, we're going to make you bounce all over
Yep,
the place
that's
now.
fine.
In front of the pharmacy and Huey's Tacos. Now that's all, like right up to the front of those buildings is in the right of way, right?
Correct.
And so what is that distance actually when you get to the front of those buildings? You know, that paved, that goes all the way up?
From back of curb,
Yeah.
in this area at its narrowest is probably it's a little bit of a guess, but I know it's probably 10 to 12 feet.
Okay. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
It's about 10 to 12 feet, and that transitions out. I mean, you get pretty wide out here. It's about 20. It's probably just over 20 feet once you get down to the other end. I'd say to this corner. It obviously gets larger in here even. There's quite a bit of space, building face to back of curb there.
Are bump outs used commonly in a mixed setting with a highway? As I can see it in a residential, like as we have down here. But is it common as much sitting here when a large truck or someone's has it been used long enough to have good commentary about how effective it's really been?
I think the things that we have learned, maybe not in District 1, but statewide, is paying close attention to truck turning movements. What kind of room big trucks need to get in and out of accesses and gas stations and things like that. So so you're going to see at certain locations, we don't have bump outs in every corner. And part of that is because we can't make it work with large vehicles getting around the corner. So we don't want somebody to be on that corner standing and have somebody cut around the corner. So I think from a design perspective, we probably pay closer attention than maybe we would have at one time.
Well, and I guess I wasn't even thinking about trucks navigating. Yeah. So I've had several people comment to me that, maybe down here that's fine, but you're a sitting duck on Highway 61, and you're the one put out there for someone hopefully to notice. But now you're even farther away from a safe space from that truck or whoever it is that's, because what you've got, of course, is the driver with the straight view who's upset that they're now being slowed down to go through a town, right? But they're already in Duluth in their brain. So now someone stands in a bump out, and are they actually not as safe as they would have been farther out? And I've had people ask me that. I got to thinking about, that does sort of make sense, because oftentimes, and I cross every single day multiple times, I can look and I can see that person is not seeing me in any way, shape, or form at all. And they're just like that. So I thought, are we really making somebody safer by putting a bump out in a situation like that? But if you've done it enough times, you've got the feel for it. And because several people have mentioned this, I thought maybe this isn't the right time, but I'm going to bring it up.
Well, the theory behind the bump out is to put the pedestrian, the curb is going to come and wrap around to where you can see where those little plates are, where the curb cuts come down.
Right.
And so the idea is to get them further out into visibility without getting them exposed to somebody had to jump the curb to hit you if you're standing out there.
But that's what I'm saying. They're visible, but they're not always necessarily. Now they're even closer up to a truck.
That's not the theory.
I know, but that's what I'm saying, that maybe it's not what people think.
And
the opposite
as
of
far
what
as that goes too, as far as visibility for pedestrians, to be able to be out and not have to look through parked cars, if there's cars parked there,
Sure.
that's another advantage.
Right.
To get out so you can see oncoming traffic
That was
to a
one
better
of the-
degree.
That was one of the big things at Fifth, right? Is that if you're driving through Fifth now, that's really dangerous because I can't see pedestrians. But if they're on a bump out, I hope, see them more than I can now.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is it maybe have the opposite effect of that, because a lot of people aren't looking.
Right, and what you can get with the bump out, again, it'll be raised up. The pedestrians waiting to cross won't be out beyond where parked cars would be. Because when you don't have them, you can get the reverse, where if there's parked cars, you get people off the curb creeping out into the roadway to see if it's clear to pass. So the experience in general has been very positive. So.
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted how I feel, because it started to make sense to me as a person who stands there frequently, and I can see no one is seeing me. And I can be right out in the middle, halfway across 61, and they are just going. And I'll be honest, when I drive through Beaver Bay, I don't want to slow down either. So, but I've heard it multiple times. So I thought it'd be good to have a discussion about it in here.
As long as we're talking about bump outs, do you want to discuss the change in maintenance responsibilities for the parking lanes?
Sure. So as part of, this was kind of one of our next steps, but as part of this process, as we do in any any urban project, is when we come through and we reconstruct, like we're doing here, a big part of that is being able to maintain what we build. And the responsibilities, and we've had one discussion so far with Mike and kind of set some expectations, but parking lanes will be the responsibility of the city of Grand Marais to remove the snow, as well as the sidewalks. And operationally, how that will work, I think there's some many details that we need to work through, but that will be one of the expectations. And like I say, that is a MnDOT policy, if you will, in all of our communities. Now, if you look at the communities in the area that have parking, they're kind of all over the board of when the parking was constructed initially. Over time, things have changed, but the approach currently is what would be required.
So not to get too far down in the weeds on that, because there's a lot of thought left to figure out how it's actually going to happen, who's going to do what, when, and all that stuff, and I think there's a lot of flexibility yet in figuring that out. But when we did have that conversation, I guess I understood that it wasn't necessarily our responsibility as much as it was our best role, where MnDOT's skills and strengths aren't really suited for all that detail edge work, and a municipality is better, and so that MnDOT might actually be paying for the city to haul snow out of that, and it's that your crews aren't going to be actually doing the removal that often, or maybe they will participate in some way, but that we'll have a role in that as well. And
That's the best way to put it.
the finances of it are really not yet figured out.
I think they are, actually. The policy is that MnDOT pays for the loading of the snow. So we would pay for the labor and the equipment of the actual loading. That's it. So that's the statewide maintenance policy. Exactly. So that's the part we would participate in.
That I don't want to dispute it. You know what your policy is. I don't. I thought and I don't recall the name of the maintenance engineer. That
Yeah, Perry. It wasn't as clear cut as that.
No,
when we
didn't
had
seem to
Perry.
be quite that clear cut.
Yeah.
But there'll be more
There'll be more
conversation
discussion. Yeah.
to come, kind of working out those details.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I think, since we're talking about parking lanes, we should, the 10-foot parking lanes and a standard regular 3/4 ton pickup being 9 feet wide, there's gonna have to be room for snow storage. So there's gonna have to be parking restrictions to allow for that because of the narrowing of the corridor. And I guess my feeling is really the only way to make that work would be to restrict one side for the season, unless someone has, anytime there's gonna be snow storage issues. Just so everybody's up front knowing what we're getting into.
And our own maintenance staff is excited to have that conversation too.
Yeah.
So I think that before 2019, we'll probably have some movement on that for citywide rules about parking and snow.
So I suggest, just for interest of time, should we get to the video and we can get some more conversation? I don't want to get too far into the weeds in any one particular issue unless the council would like to talk further.
Well, we like to get into the weeds every once in a while.
But I guess the point being on the parking, there's some details we need
Yes.
to work out on the maintenance side and as far as the funding goes and things like that.
While you're getting your little video ready, are you folks the same group involved in the Two Harbors project, or is that a totally different crew? I want
Let's
to
see,
ask you
is
any
there
more
any-
questions if it's
maybe-
totally different.
Maybe Mike from our maintenance group, yes.
Oh, okay.
I think
CJ's
CJ.
working on that.
I was just, kind of generally wondering, is our project feel totally different from Two Harbors? Are we going to see a lot of the same things and is it worth our time to kind of start paying more attention to that? It's coming up this summer, see how it goes. Can we be learning some things to get ready for 2019?
So the project that's in Two Harbors for this construction season is really focused around some intersection improvements. And they are starting a process, more of a long-term, what are they going to do through town? There's a lot more space in Grand Marais than there is in Two Harbors, width-wise. So there's going to be a lot more challenges there with some of the same things, parking and snow removal. And,
So their project
facility.
isn't as extensive as this?
Not the one that's for this construction season,
Oh,
correct?
okay. I thought it was just going through the whole thing like this.
It says signal replacements on Highway 61, resurfacing, accessibility improvements.
Yep. So it's ADA improvements at intersections and signals.
Okay, so we're from Third to Broadway is the extents of the animation. Basically runs here. We kind of go out and turn around and come back through that area. Just a couple notes. It goes up and then comes back, just to give you. The entire corridor is not modeled, and you can sort of think of it as I don't know if you've ever seen a cardboard model where you have landform. The pieces of cardboard are stacked up. It's a concept model, so the intention isn't to have kind of a true surface modeled, but the dimensioning and the overall the design, as we've just looked at it in the geometric plan, are all the scale, and so this has been updated too since our last meeting. And I'll just kind of let this play and talk a little bit. But at Third, again, this enhanced corners. This is the 12-foot wide trail, and you can see the pedestrian street light on the left, and we'll have some other close-ups of that. Java Moose is right on your right. Some different seating locations, some planting separation between the trail and the expanses of the paved parking, on-street parking on the left. And then approaching, this is the Dairy Queen location, and
That's kind of hard to
Yeah, I was already ahead too far. No wonder I was confused.
crossing here. So there's the Gunflint Trail signs, and so we showed kind of a little bit of an opening of that space, and then in front of us in the foreground are some raised planters, but an enhanced site within the corridor. And when you were talking about bump outs and visibility, locating pedestrian lights at those locations, at everything in the design, including changing the tree plantings and the scale or size of the trees, is geared to bring attention to those crossing points. So there's a number of design factors along with the bump outs that go to help. Drivers are going to miss people forever, and that can't all be prevented, but the design cues are all there to try and bring awareness. So as we transition eastbound, the trail crosses over. This is Spur or Bucks. How that transition works. The community garden that's at the corner is right there, south of the border. This is where this is where it goes to 10 feet wide. The trail does. And then the Broadway intersection, you can see the kind of steps in the model that reflect elevation. It's, from a landform standpoint, it's diagrammatic, but
I feel like I'm looking at a college campus or something.
as we move down, that's the plow.
Oh, you had it all out of there.
And then the parking.
Where's the snow?
We didn't do a winter model, but approaching the pharmacy then, and you're asking about kind of the width of the pavements. There's a small seating area here as well. There's the ADA ramp up to the front door. It's kind of done in combination with the seating location where we used a board form concrete raised seat wall. The rose garden kind of up on the right, and the public green space in front of the library. It's kind of the focus of that view. As we adjusted the road to the 12-foot lanes and 10-foot parking, we also readjusted the boulevard to keep them at 8-foot width everywhere we could. There's a few places where we couldn't, but we wanted to keep that width there for snow storage in between back of curb and the sidewalk. That's the area where we're out of space and the sidewalk moves up to back of curb. And then in front of the brewery, kind of the planted condition there. The street lights are at the bottom. So that transitions, and after this is some of the detail pieces that we're looking at and that we developed through the process. And really grabbing a couple cues from other built features in town and kind of a bit of a Grand Marais aesthetic. We were kind of given the directive, let's not look at one specific only bench, or that there might be a mix. And so we looked at different ways of doing benches with materials bike rack, kiosk. This is the pedestrian light on a concrete base with some kind of the steel reinforcement on the edges. Essentially heavy timber. This is that board form raised planters, which is great for maintaining plants, keeping them healthy and a little bit out of the salt. Slightly different lighting type and how you can integrate kind of that wood timber bench into those planter locations. This is that campground sign amenity site, or what we call community spaces. And again, these are sort of thought about in context of materials in town, as well as even potential partnerships of people in town who may be able to perform these types of work if they're in, or more so not in, the project. The removal of the trail heading down into the campgrounds, you can see there. This is that landing overlook and how that transitions out a few spaces for bike racks and then kind of an integrated seat or bench with that wall. So the covered bridge would essentially be right there in front of you in the bay in the back, kind of the view from the other side. And then there's that ADA sort of switchback right there that takes you down to the covered bridge.
Look at all this uncontrolled.
And this was that mail carriers and Old Dog Trail memorial space in front of the post office. So a couple locations for bike racks.
And to speak a little bit about that, when we were talking about that one, I don't know if you have to pause it or not. We're going to get behind, but the idea was that that brown part of that design. So let's see when it cuts back there. That was like one of the ideas was that would be a that would be like Corten metal that had like images cut through it, so you see that dark reddish
Right here.
piece there. Yeah, there. Thanks. I was like, I'm trying to point at it, but it doesn't do me any good. So like that was one of the ideas that was brought, was to have images of like dog sledding and things like that cut into metal on the back side of that, just like an illustration or something like that, which I think would be a pretty neat idea. But you know, right now this one is the one that would require the most work to get it to happen. So just because of land
A lot of that's on private
purchasing and agreements and things like that.
Yeah,
But
you know,
it's an interesting idea.
right away falls right here. So the just like this. So this edge might be close to, or it's kind of on the edge of right away, but the majority of this is in right away. And I mean, that was kind of the sort of an early concept on what you could do with those things, but those are things that kind of take on the life in the final design process after municipal consent, and sort of a prioritization on the city's standpoint on what seems to fit, what looks like a good idea.
So, since you have that intersection up, and I'm sure you've had plenty of conversation about it, have we made any changes or anything that will make that a safer area if there's ever a little small town congestion, which I'm sure you heard, that's the space. Between there and the bank and the credit union and the post office is a zoo. And it's ripe for constant car banging, which it is.
Yeah.
If there was ever a thing I'd like to move, it's the post office. But do you think, is in all of this design, is there anything that really helps that?
I don't think we really changed much about traffic and access for the post office here. So it should be pretty
Just because
similar.
we did add, we did add bump outs and actual crosswalks in that area, which would help for people getting across the street.
But most of those people are in cars, except for me when I walk over there.
Yeah, it's with that driveway right next to the intersection, it's just a mess. And there's not much for us to do about it.
And they're heading, they're heading up to the post office and right into the bank and whatever. Okay.
This was the parking area at the road closure, dental office in the back. Zoom back to there. So we had shown how that at the edge of this, there's a space, in a publicly owned space that could be an opportunity on the east end of the corridor we were working with, and how you begin to address kind of the experience of that trail as well as driving along the road. So different ideas, and with all of these spaces, the intention really is about rest. In this case, it might be information, public art, essentially a place to sit, getting some other vertical elements into the corridor as well, which helps with a sense of scale and some enclosure. And then bike racks is another key component to what we were showing. Really on both sides of the road, but certainly where there's the multi-use trail, which runs by here, that wanted to make sure that those facilities are included.
And if this stays as a municipal parking lot, but used primarily by a private business, is that all good, fine and dandy? Or is that almost something where it feels like it should have been land acquired by that private business so they can have a parking lot if they want it?
Yeah, I think that details always felt pretty unfinished to me. And because it's all on city right away, we have all the time in the world to have those conversations with whomever we want and figure that out.
So it's still flexible.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily get done with this project. As a matter of fact, it probably doesn't get done with this project. So, but we wanted to think about those issues where this project was making changes that were going to affect businesses, and that was one of the pieces where we got feedback right away, was if we close that street, we're removing a lot of parking, not just for the dental office, for the bank and for everybody else over there, that they do a lot of on-street parking. So we just wanted to at least draw some options that showed a response to that feedback.
And one of the good things about having that be a public parking area is that then those businesses can't restrict parking in those spaces. They can be for anybody to park there if we have a really busy day downtown or something like that.
But then where does that leave the dental office? And then they're farther up the street.
But isn't that what you're saying? Like, that you're saying?
No, I'm saying whatever, just assume they had it. So they had to off-street parking.
Yeah, we can't sell it to them. We don't own it. It's a right of way. If we wanted to not have it, we'd have to vacate it.
Okay.
And then half of it would go to their side and half to the other. There's actually a little triangle of private property on that green space. I don't know who owns it.
Well, that's a good detail.
And we probably wouldn't vacate it because we're using it for utilities right now. But there's still a lot of conversations to be had about improvements and who's responsible for them.
But those are the kind of details that's good to know.
Yeah.
When people are trying to understand why didn't we do this, well, it's not that simple.
Well, another example of that would be in front of the Cobblestone building down by the brewery. And so, that showed inside one of those hash boxes, it showed parallel parking right up to the buildings there, and then also on-street parking in front of it, which increases a dramatic amount of parking there. And the rule that we've been informed of for this is that the DOT can't do improvements on private property. They can only do it in the right of way. Well, in that case, the right of way runs right up to the side of that building.
Not here at the moment.
Oh no, it doesn't.
At one
it cuts
time,
down, there you
actually, we did have it back there. It was not finalized, but at one time, you're right, Jake.
Yeah, so it did
was
cut
back
across there. Yeah, okay.
But that isn't the case, but it was shown incorrectly.
Okay. Well, that's good then. I'm glad that came up. But that kind of a design there is something that also is. There's a lot of conversation to be had about that part of the project being developed as well. So to look at something like that. So there's a lot of these things are conceptual in that we're trying to solve problems that people have brought up, and these are some of the ways that we've puzzled out with the DOT guys about how we can all mutually accomplish some of these goals.
And what's useful about that is when you're asked to approve the layout, but you don't understand how some of those issues are going to get resolved, it's difficult. Now you can see how the issues could be resolved, and it's easier to accept where all the layout lines end up.
Yeah, and I would say, like in this case in particular, we explored numerous options, with a couple of things in mind. One is trying to keep cars off the sidewalk, and two, creating a safe walking path for people. But The third was keeping that business functioning correctly with the parking, and it's so narrow. And, essentially this is one of these areas where people will be using MnDOT right away for parking movements. And so there's a real effort and not a lot of options with some of these locations because it's so constrained. And we're able to get this functioning. They store a lot of goods here, so we wanted to make sure that buffer was considered, whether it's a walkway and goods move someplace else or not. But it's the strategy sort of vetted out how the private properties are using this as well. And the reason angled parking is showing here because this is a functional dimensional standard for parking. And they might be able to get away with a 90 degree, but it would not ascribe to any acceptable dimensions, for parking design. This does, and so we've got a workable solution in a case where there's just really not a lot of other options. But so.
So when you say it has to kind of use, were you saying when they back up, they might kind of end up into the white area to have space to back out?
Right away runs.
The right away. The little tiny dash line above the fat dash line there.
This
Yeah.
is
It's the
right
right
away.
away line.
Oh, okay, but not all the way back
Yeah.
into the white.
So
Okay.
some of that parking area, like some of the turning
The maneuvering.
maneuvering area for that parking area is actually in the right of way. And that's.
And there's encroachments on right away. That's why it's a tricky project and difficult, and why we vetted out a lot of different options. And our role in this, we've thrown kind of everything at the table, and everything's been welcome for exploration, and so we've gotten down to what we feel are the best solutions based on the feedback from the meetings we've had and what's possible.
One of the community goals, I think, in this was to make 61 less of a slash across the city, to bring the two sides together. And one expression of that I've heard more of in the last few weeks is from businesses on the north side that they really don't feel like they're part of downtown. The lights aren't the same, there are no Christmas decorations, they're just different, and they don't like being left out. And so I've been telling them that I thought that this goes a long way toward resolving their objections, because it does tend to tie the south and north of 61 together much better.
That is very true. When people are exploring the community, they just don't cross 61 as frequently to go into stores, and it's sort of the end of it for them. So if this helps bring that traffic up.
Right. That was a big part of the design, was to try and address that.
It looks so fancy.
Isn't that great?
So is it true that like the plantings and trees, the things you see it's more representational, that's an idea, right?
At this point, that all of the landscaping is essentially part of that amenities package, and it's an idea that what we showed in the animation is exactly what you see here in the plan. So it's it's a to be determined item. And
Beaver proof?
What's that?
Beaver proof? We haven't had a conversation with our local
But
parks.
all of the existing trees on the south side go away, right?
Oh, yeah, existing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of those trees are showing significant signs of stress anyway, so that's
I was more thinking, sightlines if you're sitting there at an intersection. Even like the campground view. I mean, if you were sitting there in an RV and you're up, whatever you're in, if you're trying to look at traffic coming from the east, and then building stuff out like that seems to maybe negate some of the. I mean, I guess it depends. Once they're 30, 40 feet tall, it doesn't matter. But
Yeah,
15 years, it's going to be.
we haven't
Difficult.
we haven't applied the view triangle to every intersection. In general, we're probably good with where the trees are located, just with the size of the intersections and the crossings and the bump outs. But I understand what you're saying, and it will get addressed.
yeah, there is a standard for that. We'll have to get that applied to the lines.
Is there any sort of general thought about lighting in city and the classic, God, I didn't turn my lights on because I didn't realize they weren't on because it's so bright, or I'm driving all the time, that influences your decision about just really how much lighting do we need.
Well, we talked about that actually in the last meeting pretty substantially because of the push from the community to entertain or to go towards a dark sky city mentality, and these guys are, they're going to help us try and figure out what the minimum of lighting is necessary for the corridor, so that for safety for their criteria, so that that's what we can go with. We can go with that.
So a couple things on that note. The lights we're showing it's essentially a full cutoff type light, so the luminaire is underneath the hood, and there's not any light that shines up directly from it. So that's one way to help mitigate that, and the other is just purely the height of the light, and then the type of luminaire that's in it. So what we're showing here is a 12 to 14 foot light, which is a pedestrian scale. It's not a tall kind of area light, and it from a lighting of a kind of a urban street section, it's way down on the spectrum of lighting what we're showing here. But it's an ongoing discussion that gets vetted with cost too, because it's an expensive item. But that's been clear since kind of day one, is we really don't know how much lighting we really need, and the message has kind of been there's some lighting in the corridor, and it seems like that might be enough. What we're doing with lighting, we're also thinking of it as a feature at crosswalks and the bump outs, again, to bring other elements to the edge of the road, and with some infrequency to help drivers look to the side. It's in some ways it's pretty simplistic, but the culmination or the conglomeration of those different elements at the edges where people are is part of the reasons why we showed some of the lights where they went. There was no like a photometric or lighting goal we were trying to meet. It was purely kind of decorative, doing a heavy timber light, bringing some.
If you had certain standards that by state you followed. Okay, so I personally would like to take a little BB gun and shoot at every light in front of the walkway there, because I'd rather go out and look at the lake or the lighthouse, and all I have to do is get blasted by those porch lights that take our little cover.
They're not going to survive the project. It's going to be rethought.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of great feedback to figure out how lighting should be, but we do have a couple of spots that kind of define the outer limits in my mind. The lighting on the highway coming down the hill to town, we regularly get told is too bright and too stark, and then that 3rd Avenue intersection, when none of those lights were working, we heard pretty clearly that that's way too dark. So somewhere in between those places is where we need to get to. And hopefully it'll be.
But at least
just right.
there's options. I didn't know if there were certain things that the state had, that kind of, well, this is what you gotta do. So you're gonna make everybody, if we can go knock on every door and say you need to show up on the 27th?
No, we'll put the word out. We've knocked on every door a number of times on this project. Talked personally with a lot of folks, and we'll keep doing that, and we'll do it on the 27th. We'll do it after the municipal consent is done. There's a lot more conversations to be had with folks when it gets closer to construction, and we need to start talking to the community about staging and traffic access and all kinds of other issues, and who to talk to during the project if you have issues. So there's many, many conversations yet to happen here.
And some of those staging conversations have already kind of happened or started happening on a preliminary stage where downtown businesses and a couple of other organizations are working together to see what kind of resources we can pull to address those things. So that's pretty exciting.
Did you move the meeting from the 27th to the 28th today? I mean, just a
No,
few minutes ago.
27th and then
So-
March 28th.
A reminder, February 27th, open house here at City Hall, 3:30 to 5:30. Everybody's invited. March 28th, regular city council meeting, public hearing. Everyone's invited, but at that point, we're going to ask the city council to approve it. So
come on the
this is not
27th.
the meeting that we were hoping to hear from everybody yet. We were already have hoped to hear from everybody. we really want to hear from people if we miss something on the 27th. Come March 28th, we still would love to get your input, but this is the day that the
We need
approval's
to
going to
make a
happen.
decision, yeah.
That'd be really good. If
So
your
we'll be
PR
spreading, we'll be
thing-
throwing out invitations to that February 27th meeting as well.
Yeah, a warning in your PR thing about how this is your chance, because we're gonna probably approve it on March 28th, would probably help people, give them incentive to come to the 27th meeting.
I mean, we intend to put it out there to all the ways that we can get it out. So if you want to keep telling people too, you certainly can, and we'd appreciate that. So,
Are there figures about how much more sidewalk space has been added all the way out to the new Gunfoot Trail? How much more maintenance? How much, I guess what I'm really getting down to is, as a taxpayer, how much more money am I going to have to spend for the maintenance department to clear out all these parking spots, to plow the sidewalks, to plow the multi-use, to plow the new dentist's parking lot? You know, how much more
Equipment are you going to
how much more equipment, how many more employees, how much more is this gonna cost us?
and those are things that we don't have an answer for yet, because we don't exactly know what the final scope of the project is actually going to be. You know, like whether we're going to be able to build those parking areas, or even if we're going to choose to address plowing snow off of those new sidewalks. You know, that far out of the out of the city. But those are conversations that we'll have to have. I'm not certain if we can throw a number out there right now, but that's something that we're considering, because we know that additional infrastructure requires additional maintenance.
Well, I think the question of the parking areas, we don't, there's not an option to not deal with that issue. The question of, in particular, snow removal on just about everything else is really up to the community, how much we want to do. And we don't remove snow off of all of our sidewalks now. We decide which ones we're willing to spend the resources to remove it off of, and some we don't. And most of our conversations about Highway 61 have considered the idea that, particularly east of Broadway, we would not be plowing both sides of the highway, that we'd leave one of those covered with snow and plow another. But we've changed our mind about what gets plowed and what doesn't on Highway 61 a dozen times since I've been here, and we'll probably keep doing that too. So I think the community can decide what's the right level of investment, and if they don't like it, they can change their minds.
And then one more thing, and maybe this is a MnDOT question. Right now, MnDOT plows the highway and
The traffic lanes.
the traffic lanes and the edge
And the shoulders.
and the edge, the shoulders. So if we took out those parking spots, the lines, and left it as a shoulder, would MnDOT continue to plow that? If we got rid of the bump outs?
Right, that's a good question.
I'm just thinking for maintenance fees.
Well, the maintenance fees, I don't know exactly how to say this. We're, like what he said, we're gonna get compensated for the loading of the snow. So like piling it and doing that stuff, we're gonna have to have our maintenance guys take care of. But the loading of it is gonna be compensated by the Department of Transportation.
And the time isn't going to be.
But we're not paying for hauling it. I mean,
No, just
that's
load
just
it.
to load it into
Yeah.
somebody's truck, not
Yeah.
ours.
Yeah.
And right now, we do plow those because there's no obstructions for us. I'm not gonna go out there and rip my truck apart for a bump out, so that's part of this scenario is why we're bringing this up now. And me as a taxpayer, just like her, who's taxed enough already, I know what it takes and what's involved with moving it, loading it, and hauling it. And I can see where this is gonna go. It's gonna become a grudge match. And I love working with these city guys. We push it to the shoulder now because there's nothing obstructing us. That's the way we do it. And I'm gonna try and help the best I can. But with those bump outs, I'm staying away because it'll bust my wing.
Right.
And then I get him mad at me, and I get written up.
Yeah.
And then just another aside, if you want to look at how narrow this is going to be, go drive by the hospital. So when there's cars parked on both sides, how do you like that? You have 12 inches more on each side. That's it. Come ride in a truck with me. with a plow down.
Aren't the lanes right now 12 foot though? Like outside of the
But you're
city?
narrowing, the parking lanes are narrowing up. So it's bringing the traffic, closer to us on the highway. I took a picture today. So there's the curb. Look at how far they're parked away because of snow buildup. This is where Mike brought up, we're gonna have to talk about some kind of calendar parking, because that car now, this is a, what are they now, 10 or 12 foot lane? If we shrink them down to 10 and now they're out to 8 on a 9 foot wide truck, I'm peeling off a foot of a truck, or 6 inches of a truck. Or I gotta move over and hope the car coming at me, or the semi coming at me, moves over or stops.
You know, this is really frustrating for the members of the steering committee because we've been working with MnDOT for years. And now MnDOT is telling us that what we've worked out with MnDOT doesn't work.
Now, keep her down a little bit there, Jim. We still
Well, no,
have to work.
it's really-
We still have to work this through.
It's really frustrating now.
Right, and I don't have to let you talk in this meeting because
Okay.
that's part of the public forum versus the agenda. So just
Or him.
keep that in mind. Well, I'm assuming that he's coming with the maintenance guy who's with Department of Transportation. If I'm wrong, then we can address that separately.
That's our vehicles, our state pickup and our plow truck up at the
Mhm.
hospital there.
Yep.
To show how narrow. It's just concerning for my liability now.
Right.
We're just trying, yeah.
Well, and these are all parts of the puzzle. Like these are all parts of this project, and we need to talk about it now before we start approving stuff, so that we can actually find something that works for the guys who are doing the maintenance on the road, and as well as the pedestrians who need to use the road themselves. So these are. I'm glad we're having these conversations now, because it would really suck if we built 11-foot lanes and then we found out that we have 12-foot trucks. Like that would be super, you know. So this is the time to be taking care of these things, and yes, we've put a lot of time into this, and I think that we can still find a way to make it work and make everybody feel happy about it, and not add a lot of expense to the city's maintenance budget for Highway 61. So maybe I'm looking at that through rose-colored glasses, but
It might be a good idea to get the employees who actually do the work together, the state, the county, and the city, and talk about it too, because they know what has to be done.
Right, and just to that point, Glenn, that has happened and will continue to happen. I mean, there's been, just so the council's aware, there's been coordination with maintenance folks within the department, and that will continue to happen. So those conversations have been initiated. There's been some modifications made already of the traffic lanes going from 11 to 12 foot that the steering committee was made aware of at our last meeting, and that process will continue. And I don't, the vision that's here is what we'll be seeking consent for March 28th. And there may be conversations that happen. There may be something that comes up at the open house on the 27th that requires us to rethink it. But we hope not. We'd want to keep moving forward, because we all recognize, and especially the committee does, that to make this project happen on the time and schedule people want it to happen, we'll need to keep making progress. But we'll continue those conversations as well. So.
And that's the kind of thing too, where I hear about it, and by then I'm hearing about it indirectly from those people. It's really not going through the right channels.
right.
So yeah, the people who plow the trucks, they're talking, but they're not talking to all the right people, and it's making too much chatter that shouldn't be. So they should all be at the table, at the right table, not at the one across the alley at my favorite table. And because they're just kind of stirring the pot. So they should be all of you folks and sitting down there.
Yep, and then we've been doing that, and we'll continue.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the parking restrictions have taken care of a lot of the concerns. From my perspective, I just don't want anybody to be surprised when that needs to happen, I mean, because there's parking's important, and it's just something that's gotta, one side or the other's gotta be able to give when we need snowstorm.
And your guys' recommendations for that stuff, when when we get to the point to have those conversations, it's going to be pretty important to have your recommendations on that. So we'll definitely keep that, keep you guys in tune with that conversation. CJ, do you have anything else to show us for tonight on this, or?
We've seen everything I've brought tonight.
Okay. So this conversation was largely just to get the council up to speed on what the design was, so that you've seen it. We've seen it before we start having meetings about public meetings about it, and so now we need to start talking to people, and we need to start getting feedback for that February 27th meeting, in preparation of the March 28th municipal consent meeting. So that's pretty much where we're at, right?
Correct. Yes.
Do you guys have any further questions for these guys while they're here?
I've heard one concern about what do you do when there's oversized loads with the narrower lanes?
Oh, yeah.
So, from district-wide perspective, we're concerned about that too. So based on the information that we have had, I think it's in the last 10 years of oversized loads that have come up 61, that the widest on the list that we permitted for was about 18 feet wide. So knowing that the distance between these bump outs is in the neighborhood of 26, 28 feet, that gives us plenty of room to maneuver through the community. Now, probably no different than what would happen under the current condition. An oversized load needs to come through. They need to have a pilot vehicle and stop oncoming traffic from the opposite direction. That would have to take place, but they physically can make it through. Yeah.
The only other thing with that would be the median being flush.
Yep.
Would be required for that and for storm.
So down this red rate, what we at one time we had we said that was going to be a raised median, and that was a concern. How are we going to get 18 to 20 foot wide load around that? And if ultimately ends up to be a flush, different colored pavement of some kind, they could drive right on top of that. So that's one of the considerations on the treatment there of that location.
That's, might be asking the obvious, but in similar projects, do you really feel like you successfully address the safety concerns that people have had about pedestrians and just generally getting around and all of us being together between a big truck and somebody's bike and somebody walking with their child? Is this something that you found successful in other communities?
Maybe look to David to. I know you've been involved in many of these.
Yeah, I think, just to harken back when we initially came to the community and got involved, and you folks had done a lot of tremendous work at the front end with your active living study and really coming up with what seemed to be a pretty solid understanding of what type of roadway components would contribute to a safer pedestrian bike kind of community. And I think this plan really reflects a lot of the things that were identified in that report, particularly for the pedestrian moving through the corridor. Compared to what you currently have, this is just leaps and bounds in the direction of a much safer transportation system. Particularly with the bump outs. I think your points about visibility are well taken, but it does put that pedestrian into a much shorter crossing distance, so those that need a lot more time have a shorter distance, and it does make the pedestrian more visible, but I don't think more vulnerable, but definitely more visible. And hopefully for the majority of the drivers that are being attentive to the roadway, yes, there are those few, as you identify, that their mind is somewhere else. The facility, as far as being a bicyclist, a number of communities, we've looked at putting the bike trail on the roadway, but after looking at a number of concepts for Grand Marais, it seemed that the best solution, which we've gravitated to, is the right solution for this setting. One thing that a bike trail on a roadway does do is it makes the winter maintenance activities, I think, a little bit more forgiving because there's some extra space. But in this case, the off-road facility seems to be the best solution when we looked at all the different concepts. So I think it addresses a number of the safety issues that were brought to the table as being a program requirement to move multimodal use through Grand Marais. So I'm really quite proud of what the team has done. I really applaud the city for all the work you've done, and then sort of keeping us on task to deliver that. The discussion about lane width, you will find a camp of people that tell you an 11-foot lane is going to be a safer urban cross-section than a 12-foot lane, simply because it makes people more uncomfortable. It makes snow plowing less convenient. It just makes us behave differently because we're feeling squeezed. But there again, we had that discussion. We looked at the equipment. We're sort of taking all of that into consideration and recognizing in this setting with a number of recreational vehicles, people pulling trailers that may not do it on a regular basis, being at the upper end of the parking width scale, because our parking standards are anywhere between 7 and 10. We're at the upper limit. Our driving lane standards are from 9 to 12. We're at the upper limit. We're at the upper limit because it seemed to be, at the end of the day, the best solution for Grand Marais.
Well, that's the safety thing. We're the bit of balancing act, because ultimately this is the highway. We're trying to make a little bit of everything.
Right.
But all these businesses depend on the fact that they get their big delivery trucks in here to make all of this work. And then we know that cross traffic out and up to Canada and back and forth, and they've got deliveries too in big trucks. So we're trying to do a lot here, and so yeah, I'm concerned about this, the safety and all the other walking, biking, but I also want to make sure this is still a functional highway, and all the trucks and boats and trailers, and I guess you were just mentioning that they're all doing okay as well to get through. It's a lot.
It
But
took us a
that's,
while to get here.
So you're not done, but you're pretty much done, and you probably had to do this other places in the state. They're
All
not
the time.
unique.
Mhm.
So have we found something you think will really accomplish that?
Right, and that's the important point. There's a lot of, depending on your perspective, are you a pedestrian, are you a biker, are you a local resident, are you a truck driver going from Duluth to Thunder Bay? I mean, your perspective is a lot different. This is a very challenging 1-mile stretch of roadway, and so we're trying to balance those as best we can, and it's not going to be 100% perfect solution for any one interest, but hopefully it can adequately address the broad range of needs.
And there's some nuances in here that we haven't talked about this evening, and just one, for example, and this gets to how easy it'll be to maintain this, and this is called a taper as you come into this bump out, and that taper can be 1-to-1, it can be 1-to-3, this may be a 1-to-4 taper. It's a pretty relaxed taper, and it's laid out that way so whoever's out there with whatever rig they're using, we're giving them an area where it's not a real sharp kind of turn. And that'll get massaged all the way through final design to try and make it easier for everybody that needs to be out there doing the work and still getting the maximum number of parking bays in there. If you think about it, 22 feet or so is a length we're trying to achieve, and then what will fit in that block, even with those tapers. So we'll work on those kind of things through the final design process to make it all seem like it works. You know, we don't want someone saying, oh, why did we build it that way? It's just not functioning. So we want to try to avoid any of that.
Well, just to be clear, the illustration that CJ showed up with the other picture shows parking bays in there, but MnDOT is not proposing to paint the lines for all of the bays, are they? Or is that?
I don't think we typically
I
would
don't
do that.
think you typically do that. No, so those lines are just shown to indicate the
Yeah,
number of
the number of
parking bays,
spaces.
not necessarily to be marked out.
We've done that to get an approximate count on
Right.
what kind of street parking you're looking at, or to be able to count it as we shuffle design around.
Do we know how many parking spots there are?
I don't know right offhand. I could follow up though and
Okay.
get the number to you quick.
Probably be good.
Yep.
Okay, well, I mean, unless you guys have something to follow up with,
No,
I think that, I mean, that's a really great summary. I'm probably going to be sharing this video with a lot of people
Great.
so that people can see the actual design, and then they can start wrapping their heads around what we're up to here. So,
The rendering is posted on the website.
oh, good.
Yeah,
And
so
states?
that is there, yeah. If you were
And
to Google
the plan.
Highway 61 Grammar A,
Yeah.
Okay.
that should be
So
the
it's
top.
it's findable. We're also going to be sending the word out to people how to find it.
Yeah.
We'll be publishing that out. So.
It'll also be in our news release too, that goes out for the 27th meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that.
Thank you for your
Okay,
time.
thank you very
Yeah,
much
thank you.
for
Thank you.
coming up.
Thanks a lot,
Yes.
that was really nice.
Very helpful.
I have a certain person.
What do you say we take a break?
Yeah, look, I was just thinking we should get up and stretch while you guys pack up, and then we can come back and talk about stormwater. Stormwater!
I'm staying.
People can see how crazy it gets around here.
That's fun. That's nice.
He's gonna be
The blood sugar back.
He's coming.
Back?
Oh, yeah.
Just because of this.
Well, it's important. And, you know, he said, okay, maybe it's all right if all the trees are gone. Well, they're gonna be gone.
We almost have a basketball down here.
Yes, I mean.
Wait, when did your
kind of.
You're the coach. No, I'm the manager, actually. I keep the ball.
Yeah, I got more commentary and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Not related to this, you know, this part, just in
I
general.
thought that Japanese.
Yeah,
And it's,
just the opposite.
the gay guy. Yeah, no, you're thinking of the guy that commentated with the big black hair. No, right? But Rick Hines is a hater. But he's getting a lot of hate stuff, and so we had this tweet today. It
It's good. It's good to have you guys. Practical concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Mike?
I didn't know what he did. Yeah, you guys pretty much blew my Valentine's night anyway, so we might as well sit here and keep talking about stuff. 'cause It's all over now.
We don't have to talk about that much more.
Where's the stormwater people?
They're not coming.
Oh.
We don't need them. We're the stormwater people.
We are the stormwater people.
What smells so hot, Patrick? What are you burning up over
I think
there?
it
There's
was.
an idling truck right
I
outside.
think it was when she
Oh,
fired up her
serious?
truck.
That's what it is?
Yeah, he's just parked out there. He's parked outside the
Furnace or
door.
something.
Loading up still with his cases.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All right, good
night.
night. See you.
Yeah, I thought maybe some of your equipment's getting hot over
Yeah.
there. I'm like, Oh.
We're on the right track.
Hopefully.
We just need
Tell
to.
Karina
Thanks.
that I
Okay.
can't get her the soil.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just a matter of.
Let's jump back in.
He has it.
Okay.
He sent me a text right before I left.
Well, that was exciting. So let's jump into the stormwater management plan now. So there's been a bunch of information that we've gotten back from the folks doing the stormwater management plan. We have some stormwater models, and we've been getting some feedback on the flooding of the downtown area, as far as what people deem is something that we can work with. And we've heard, quite a few responses from 6 inches for a couple of hours to 12 inches for 24 hours. But really, people have been saying that anything over, like flooding, anything over 24 hours is pretty much unacceptable. So we still are seeking to get a lot more feedback on what's appropriate for the downtown area in those situations. Understanding that some of those things, like seiches and things like that, are not going to be things we can really deal with.
If anybody hasn't had a chance to go on the city's website, do so. On the left-hand side, there's a Grand Marais Stormwater Management Plan, which will bring you to a series of documents, one of them being a map that our consultants did produce that show when it floods a particular depth, how much area of that parking lot is covered. And that's the tool we're trying to use to set a tolerance level for how much a goal of the maximum amount we'd like to see there for what duration of time. So one of the bits of feedback we did get back from folks, and thanks Jim for sending that out to people, was that any flooding at all makes us look bad.
Yeah.
Another piece of feedback we get is we understand that no flooding is not feasible. Another piece of feedback that we got is that we need to understand what it's going to cost and what projects will be required before we can really tell you what flooding we're willing to live with. So understand that right now we're going to ask the City Council to pick a number for a tolerance level and a duration. It's just a goal. We're going to use that goal to answer the question, what projects will it take and how much money will it cost to achieve that goal? And that's going to be an iterative back and forth then that the city will have to decide which of these can we afford, what opportunities to get assistance can we look for. But the first necessary step there is to just pick a number of the depth that we'd like to have our consultants use in the modeling to develop the projects that we'll include in the plan. So,
There we go.
who wants to pick a number?
Don't all jump at once, right? I think probably the best way, and the purpose of this is to do this like tonight, so that we can
Right now.
give them a number.
Here now. Yep.
So let's talk strategy a little bit. Does it serve us better to overestimate and get big projects back, or does it do us better to underestimate and get not quite as big projects back in suggestion? I personally think it probably serves us a little bit better to get to overestimate and get bigger projects back, because we can always scale them down. Whereas if we're shooting for like, we can do a foot for 24 hours, or we can do 2 feet for 24 hours, then we're going to get smaller projects, which are much, much harder to scale up, in the case that most people probably aren't going to be okay with the fact that the city council agreed with 2 feet for 24 hours. Is there a reason to that? Am I barking up the wrong tree?
Yeah, makes sense.
Makes sense.
So then we need to pick a number and a time frame that captures that.
But
That
it is
sounds a little
crazy.
casual.
It does sound casual. It also sounds a little, I don't know. I mean, it's almost impossible. What is to me, it's almost like, well, what is 3 inches, right? Like, what does that cost? Is it $6 million or is it $2 million? And what is 36 inches, right? Which pretty much means we'd be sitting in water. I mean, is that $50,000? Well, okay, no, that's not right.
We probably don't have to do anything for
Right.
36 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, we're probably good there.
Oh, sorry, no, it goes up at 30.
Yeah.
30. Okay.
Well, but even at 30, you can see that's like the water's in the map. It's starting to kind of infiltrate into the city
That
hall.
ramp on the door there. So, I mean, I don't, right, I mean, I don't feel like even looking at the two maps that we have and like this, like, how am I can't make that decision. I mean, I
So,
guess we
yeah.
might have to make that decision, but it seems like that's no information. I mean, what's the range? What's,
Mm-hmm.
because 12 inches are, that's, I mean, I think I said that, we were talking about this yesterday and said, well, it depends on what shoes you have on, right? I mean, do you think do you have rain boots on? Or are you like, oh, whatever, you got dress shoes on? It makes a difference.
Right.
So, all of them are an inconvenience.
Right.
But what's the scope of what's the range? If we don't have any idea what the range is and the costs, again, I have no idea. I have no idea if it's 0 to whatever, $1 billion.
So remember, you're not committing
Right.
yourself to any resource allocation.
Right, but we are in some way by trying to figure out what we're setting the threshold at. Because if we're then going to say, okay, well, here's our tolerance, it's 12 inches or 30 inches or 4 inches, we are kind of, that's where we're going to be putting money into, to be putting out RFPs for trying to figure out what the solution is, right? I mean,
No, we're gonna, our plan that we're developing now will be an attempt to answer that what the solution is question. And so they've already created this stormwater model.
We can assume that obviously going with a 3-inch plan versus a 24-inch plan are going to be vast swings of dollars. But again, what is that? What
Yeah,
is that?
so don't attach as much value to this initial decision as you're attaching. You're already explaining why it's not that important, because it doesn't come with a cost. So that's an important bit of meaning, that without that cost, it's not very relevant, but we just need a starting place.
Yep.
So pick a starting place. We'll come back then with a lot more information that talks about, well, what if 200 rain gardens get installed within this block, this area, or what if everybody puts, rain barrels on their gutters, or what if we pass a stormwater ordinance that people have less impervious surface, or what if we divert water at these 5 intersections, and they'll use the model to then tell us what effect that'll have in this downtown area and show us how it changes. So then we'll get to see, okay, if we spend this much money on these things, it'll get us this close to our goal. So it's not not chiseling this in stone.
We're not talking about like. We're not talking about simply. I mean, it shows the drainage areas for the city, right? But the big thing seems to be what's happening right here.
Maybe we need to take a step back.
Are we doing? Am I missing something?
Yeah, let's take a step back, because this is just a little piece of the project. The entirety of the project is a stormwater model that encompasses all the subwatersheds that flow through the city, and trying to identify in those areas how much, given any particular rain event, how much water is going to come off of those areas and where it's going to end up. So it models the drainage patterns, the slopes on the ground, the type of ground that it is, whether it's developed or not, whether it's wooded or not. It has all of our ditches, all of our pipes, all of our catch basins. They actually came in and observed while it was raining in November, thankfully. It was raining in November so they could see it in action, right? And so they kind of know, well, typically the water goes this way, or it was planned to go this way, but in actuality it does this and goes over here. And then they built a model after that with all that information that encompasses the entire city. We've had a series of public meetings. The first one was an attempt to set some goals with the plan. So what are we trying to achieve with a stormwater management plan? We just came up with 2 simple goals. One is to deal with flooding, and one is to deal with water quality. Now, to drill down into those goals a little bit, when we talk about flooding, there was 2 focus areas that were identified. The first one is, well, right here, and that's no surprise. We knew that would be a part of this plan before we even started.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is the village ditch and parts of that are kind of overwashing banks or eroding. So we're just focusing on one piece of one goal when we're talking about setting a tolerance level for this parking area downtown. Then the other goal is water quality, and we haven't set a goal yet for that, and I think we're still looking at that. That's even harder to do, to just ask you to set a goal for it. So we're probably going to ask our consultants instead to give us a goal based on best management practices for water quality. Then we're going to be asking them, and they'll develop a list of potential projects, and they'll be they've already started this, right? They already came through town and identified, well, you could put a rain garden there, you could put a rain garden there, you could do a diversion here. This catch basin's not working, you need to rebuild it. Stuff like that, and those projects, then they'll try to associate those with what improvement they'll make towards either improving flooding or improving water quality. And we'll use that to prioritize them. And then those ones that are prioritized will actually get cost estimates to do. So all that's in the works right now anyway. But we also asked them to do some specific modeling for us. So not just build a model, but use it a couple of times. And one of the places that we asked them to specifically model what happens is this downtown area and the flooding. So you're seeing this map, and because we have this map, we can kind of understand a little more clearly, well, what does it mean to have 6 inches of water in the parking lot? How much of the parking area is actually covered by that? Just to give us all kind of a shared understanding of what we mean when we say flooding, and how much we're willing to live with, and whose parking is affected, and what building actually gets water to its edge at what depth.
Yep. And on that note, what he just said, looking at this drawing here, if you look at the circles, as soon as you get out to a foot of water, then you start encroaching on one of the businesses and taking up a pretty considerable portion of the parking area there. So that, I feel like doing anything more, like asking them to pursue anything more than 12 inches is a waste of our time. Or wait a minute, did I say that right? Yes. So setting, we should either set the threshold at a foot of water or less. That's what I think. And it seems like, as far as time is concerned, I don't have any way of really measuring that, and knowing how long that is. So I think that maybe we're just gonna have to give them an inch, and a measurement, and then just say not a long time or something like that, and see what they come back, because that's, to a certain extent, we can't control the infiltration of that area because the infiltration happens through the pond.
Well, that's how it happens now. We can't control it. We build the pond, so we can do other things. The duration is probably the harder one for us to deal with than the depth, because we're limited in our responses.
Yeah.
But we also kind of know how it behaves now. It's pretty rare that there's water in there for more than 12 hours or more than 24 hours. So, and we've received feedback, particularly from the businesses who front on the parking lot, and they both kind of said, well, it's an inconvenience to have any flooding at any time, but understanding that the resources are involved, maybe 12 hours or 24 hours is an okay time for it to be dealt with.
So I would say, I'm just trying to make a proposal here so that we can start conversation about this. If we said 12 inches for 12 hours, that's the starting place.
Yeah.
And unless we feel like we want to get it small, deal with it before that. But honestly, if we can cap the flooding at that, then we're kind of assuming that all other flooding events, other than really, really bad ones, will flood less than that. So I think that's probably what we should shoot for, something like that, and then assume that 12 inches of water in that parking lot for 12 hours is kind of as bad as it's going to get, or that's what we want to shoot for creating that environment. Understanding that there will be events that will just totally screw up all of our plans, because that's what happens. But What do you think? Does that sound like something to move forward with? Are we being super naive? Should we be throwing a different number at it?
I just think it's, I mean, what's 6 inches, right? I mean, to me, 12 inches is like, that's a lot of water. And I know that that's at the drain, right, and it all tapers back out. But it just seems like we're basically saying, we're okay with, and maybe we have to be because of where we are. I'm not a hydrologist, I don't understand this, like, yes, right, 3 inches sounds better than 12 inches of rain. But it just, I don't know, it seems like, and again, maybe I'm overthinking it, but it just seems like
Well, I
a
hear
weird thing to try and have. I mean, how much water is there? Like, what is that? Like, when it is flooded out there, I mean, is there 12 inches or is there 16 inches?
Well, I mean, you can
see it on the.
here,
But
but
that's-
it gets to. But
The extents of this model, one of the ways that they used to calibrate it was you can actually see where the water was that last event that we had where there was flooding. So there's indications out how high the water got. And they went out and measured that. And so this is basically the extent of the last flooding event that we had. There were 30 inches of water over that drain.
Wow.
That's what that map means.
That's what that map means. And so you can see, well, it gets right up to the door of City Hall, so we kind of know that's one of the areas.
it goes right up to the back door of Best Western.
Covers the street out here for the most part, although there's a few spots where it crowns out and you can see it. It goes all the way across First Street and covers that parking area. And it kind of surrounds all those buildings. So,
I believe inundate would be a good word for those buildings.
well, thankfully they've built up, so they're not inundated anymore.
You have
But
to
they're
put all
definitely.
the public buildings on stilts.
It's just like down in the tropics. Yeah, so I mean, I hear what you're saying, Anton, and we're not hydrologists. Like, what the heck?
Well, I just feel like, I guess when you think of it that way, like, yeah, I mean, obviously 30 inches has happened. It's happened this year.
Yeah.
And so, would it only, 12 inches would never make it out of the parking lot. It would still be
Right.
all within the curbs of
Yeah.
that. So is that okay? I don't know, it just seems like you're engineering still a bad result, right?
Well, then let's-
Or not a bad result, but it's still a crummy situation.
I totally understand what you. Yeah, I agree with
Tracy,
you. I
say
agree with you.
something. What do you
Tracy, say something.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna give the choice to Tracy.
I don't think you guys want to hear what I want to say.
Uh
I do. You want 3
oh.
inches.
Now I really want to
Say
hear
it.
what you have to say.
I wasn't going to take that bait. I think we should take her at her word.
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say. You should say it. This would be fun. You're gonna just say, "Let it flood."
0.
You know, it's. Thank God for the Historical Society and Dan Helmerson, because you can see that this is just what it is. And we can't control Lake Superior, and this is what is here. And great, people decided to still build up over there, and I just don't ever expect it's going to not be an issue. And if we ever totally solve it, wow, I will be completely surprised. But that's what it's been. And if all these other things you talked about, like stopping the water down, that was interesting in your meeting when they said, look, it's not like the main channels that we make water go that cause this and all that. I thought, okay, it's not a matter of when we dig up the highway here and put things in that all of a sudden is going to make it go away either, right? It isn't what I think most people obviously think it is the answer. So, and then we all talk about wanting to live in a small town and be, not be regulated in whatever every 2 minutes, right? But then, darn it all, a little water gets in the parking lot and we all just blow a gasket. So where's the happy median on the fact that we all like our small town living, but then all of a sudden we want everything as pretty and perfect as it might be in a larger metropolitan thing, which is sort of the whole issue around the Highway 61 project as well. I don't know. I mean, I think there's some tolerance, and I think we should do everything we can in more inventive ways to try to keep the water coming down for all sorts of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But to somehow say we may be able to make it perfect, I'm not so sure we can.
Well, I don't think we can make it perfect, and I think that would be a fool's errand. And part of the reason why I think that suggesting 12 inches is that Like, I think that 12 inches probably is somewhat attainable. But anything below that, I think that's a pipe dream. Like, I honestly do. I think that we're gonna, I mean, we're gonna be fighting so many forces of Mother Nature to try and get the water not to go there. That you know, trying to eliminate what 12 inches means, we take 18 inches off of that last storm total. You know, can we redirect 18 inches deep of water over a size that's like 6 Olympic football or Olympic swimming pools? Like that's a lot of water. And that's why I think that we should shoot for something like 12 inches for 12 hours, because then if we do that, then we'll at least come up with ideas to get us closer to it. But it's not going to be like if we said 3 inches, like we will not tolerate anything more than 3 inches in that. You know, then we're going to start getting some pretty ridiculous suggestions back about, like, you need to create this massive stormwater suction, you know, plan or something like that. I don't know.
Well, and I can't remember if I asked this at that meeting that night or not. But when I walked away, and we talk about those beautiful sidewalks now that we put, which people appreciate and they like to walk on between the school and the hospital and everything. And I hate to sound like an old fart here, but so when I was a kid, that was just a nice little ditch with a fun little creek, and every kid played in it, and you went back to school and your shoes and your feet were wet, but you had a lot of fun. And when you went up behind the school and by the football field, you got to go there and get out your little mini tadpoles, because that was always flooded.
Mm-hmm.
And then every night you heard the frogs croak, and that was cool. And I don't hear any frogs croak anymore. And it's a nice, safe sidewalk, and that's great, but I miss playing around that little creek. It looked kind of cool. And the question I don't know if I ever asked was, did that create problems with water? Did we address that? Or where does all that water go now that used to run down that little creek? Or was it a bigger problem when it was a creek? I don't really know. And then, but things change, so I don't like to say that out loud, like, kind of miss my flooded football field so I could go dig little tadpoles out, you know, because you can't keep everything just the way it was either. So what's sort of the middle ground on all that?
Well,
Having a nice, safe sidewalk for people is probably pretty important.
Every activity that we make is going to have consequences, right? You know,
Yeah.
so like digging the village ditch dried out the football field, but then it ran all that other water down, you know, down around the edge of town. You can see that in the drainage map. And so with that, now we have to take a look at erosion and you know, and bank reconstruction stuff, because that creek is out of control sometimes when the water gets really big. So I mean, everything that we do is going to have a consequence. But I think that the purpose of this exercise is to mainly take a look at what consequences are we okay with, and like how can we control the consequences of the actions that we see are necessary to take. And you know, with the feedback that we've gotten thus far from people in the community that are, you know, directly and indirectly impacted by this flooding, they seem to tell us that they don't want it to last for a really long time, and they don't really want anything that impinges on the businesses there.
Mhm.
And if we use those two things as our guidelines, then, you know, 12 inches draws a line that leaves access to both those businesses, and, you know, leaves some parking, but, you know, and doesn't become dangerously deep.
Is that
So-
the 12 green?
Is that the 12 green, or is this the one?
It's the fourth
2,
color.
3, 4. It's this kind of
So it would kind of go out
limey
into
green.
the street, right?
Yeah, it would go out in the street, but it wouldn't go across the street.
So that's not the 12.
That's the 15 inches.
Oh, okay.
So this is 15 inches out here.
All right, as long as
So-
that's not the 12, because then I say you have impeded people's access, you know, and that
But you
we
do have
haven't
to keep
solved
the
it.
sign up saying flooding.
Well, I don't think that anybody's arguing about taking that down. So,
You don't have to do a big ass.
so
And, you know, you're right, and a lot of it's just setting expectations. If it's unrealistic to think we'll ever keep it dry all the time, we start a big project like this, and then people still aren't listening, and they're like, why isn't it dry now? You're doing this one more time?
Well, and
and
it's-
you're like, okay.
that's a really valid point,
That
because
would be my point, is like, what is that, so if that culvert is, or that drainage, I mean, I don't, what are the elevations of what the lake is at right now compared to what that grade is at?
Yeah, there's just a few feet.
yeah, and that's
It's a
part
few
of
feet?
Yeah, it's not a lot. So the effective storage in that drainage pond is not very much.
I think that drain elevation is 604.7. So, what's the lake at now? 602?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, this last fall, the lake was at an all-time high, pretty much.
So that drain is the low part of the downtown, but still, there's not a lot of room to work with here.
And that's I guess because if you design a project that's still going to allow 12 inches of flooding, the 25% of the people that have actually weighed in on this and are like, oh, 12 inches of flooding would be fantastic if that's all it was. And the other 75% that are like, what, they just did how much, and they did this, and the studies, and all this, and they spent all this money, and look at the whole thing is flooded still. They don't care that it's 12 inches or 24 inches.
Right.
They still think, oh, look at that, a silly city project that failed.
Right. Well,
Right?
and we've heard that.
I'm not
Like,
trying to
that's-
say like
Yeah.
I completely understand and agree with Tracy in a sense of like, yeah, I mean, if we can come out of that with those recommendations, like you're saying, where like we're looking uphill at what those changes can be versus, you know, right, because the solution isn't going to be just what happens at the catch basin and at the park, you know, here.
Mostly not. Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
it's not here that it's gonna get the.
I just, yeah, I mean, I guess it's.
No, I hear what you're saying.
I'm not trying to say that I don't want to solve the problem, but it's not a problem that necessarily can be solved, right? Or we don't know. I mean, are they like, oh yeah, sure, we could get that to a point? I mean,
No, they seemed pretty sure that any reasonable list of projects was not going to prevent any flooding down
yeah,
there.
no, I mean, right, yeah.
This
So-
is a symptom. I think the best way to look at this is a symptom, and that as we put together the stormwater management plan, we want to make sure that we can do the things that will lessen the symptom, and you know that way the stormwater management plan isn't going to be marketed as this is the campaign to eliminate flooding in the downtown. It's a stormwater management plan, like that's what it is, and then you know that comes with expectations. Now, when you say that, you know. The reason that we're having this conversation is because people forgot that was built as a catch basin, and
On top of a swamp.
On top
that
of a
used to
swamp.
be a pond.
yeah, that used to be a catch pond. So that so.
But I also
when you
don't-
put it like that,
I mean, because isn't that kind of where we're at now? Because wasn't there some expensive option that was available that when that, like, there was?
No,
the-
no,
not
there
the
was
fix.
never if you'd spent this much money, it wouldn't be a
Well,
problem.
I'm not saying it would go away, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be within some tolerance that we're being asked to.
in the
right?
previous
No.
plan, there was a suggestion for an overflow valve from the pond on the other side of that berm on the beach. That was abandoned because, number one, it was huge and it was really expensive, and it was this massive concrete structure that had to be built into the beach.
Yeah.
With,
Mostly we abandoned it because we didn't think it would work.
well, and it
Because
also
we
would
think the
take-
lake would destroy it
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that the wrong decision was made then. All I'm saying is that
Yeah.
just.
Well,
We're
that
trying to get ideas.
when we looked at that parking lot, we hired an engineer to look at that parking lot. You know, that wasn't a stormwater management plan.
It was that.
It was an opportunity. We're working on the parking lot. Let's think about what we can do now to make this work better. This stormwater management plan is trying to let us look at what we're doing and what the choices we're making that are contributing to what's going on over there. And so it's not just about mitigation projects that look like big pipes in the ground or big pumps. It's also about when you build 45-foot streets instead of 28-foot streets, it makes a lot more runoff.
Or
when you
pave a
build
parking
10 new
lot
houses
instead
a
of having
year-
gravel parking lot.
Actually, that's the same.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's you know, if there are things that we take for granted with how we're creating this runoff and what we're not doing to fix it, that we could do something different about. And I think that's great that it'll give us those options, information about what we can do. And then as a community, we can have the conversation that Tracy really delved into, which is, well, do we want to regulate ourselves to deal with this? Do we want to pay for something to deal with this? Do we want to change our behavior voluntarily to deal with this? Or are we just not willing to do anything to deal with this? And we get to decide still, so.
Oh, go ahead.
Plus, I think some of the ideas they came up with are really great ideas. and then I would think a lot of people would really like to do in their yards and whatever, and it'd just be great. It'd take a little bit of talking about, but and they certainly sound easier and better than some huge construction mechanical engineer thing that probably. I was happy to hear solutions like that over.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see them all, so.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, though, I mean, with all that said, I do think that it's important to give these folks that we hired a number and an expectation to go from. And that's what they asked for. And you know, given the understanding that, you know, just as much tomorrow I'll hear from people saying, a foot for 12 hours? Really? You know, like, and then I'll hear from people saying exactly what Tracy just said. It's just like, let the damn thing flood. You know, we're going to hear stuff all over the board, but I do think that it's important to give them a reasonable number so that we can at least see what kind of projects we can contemplate. And I propose that that's 12 inches for 24 hours.
Is that a motion?
That sounds like a motion.
I'll do
I
that.
thought we did
Just-
12
just-
for 12.
What?
I thought you said 12 for 12.
He did.
That's what I did. Isn't that what I just
Just
said?
now you said 24.
Did I?
I guess I didn't listen.
Why
12
don't
for
you
12.
restate your motion?
Okay.
Well, we're working on this, Joan. Well, then that would be a motion to provide the number 12 inches for 12 hours for consideration for the stormwater management plan. So, is there a second? Ooh, that's the tricky one, isn't it?
You want to flip a candy heart?
Or you
Okay,
just
I'll
want,
second it.
Okay, because otherwise we could let it die for lack of a second.
No.
Please
no.
don't.
We need to do stuff and help and make this better. I didn't mean to sound like I don't care at all. It's not really.
I don't think
what
you sounded like
meant,
you didn't care. Anyway,
I just-
further discussion.
I'm not saying that either. I mean,
But you don't care. Okay.
You know, this whole town is built sort of underwater to a point. You know, you look at these old buildings down there on Main Street or Wisconsin or whatever. Like, they've always had water in their basement because they're really underwater.
something about beach gravel being porous.
I showed someone that there was a plan that was made. I don't remember where I found a copy of it, but there was a plan that was made that included canals around the city.
Well, they need to put one on the west side since they put one on the east side.
Yeah.
Think of our R1 zone that would open up.
Oh my gosh.
Want me to get going on that now, Mike?
Not right now.
So
Thanks for
anyway,
asking.
that was the plan that got the most positive feedback from people when they showed. But then I was just like, oh my god, could you realize how terrible the water would be in that canal?
I think he shook his head yes. I don't even think you have to ask for a vote. You can just recognize consensus and we can.
Okay, so any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor for the motion as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Okay. Great. So that's just for that's just our
A kickoff goal.
kickoff. Yes, there you go. That's good. All right, so we're gonna move on to council reports. We don't have anything else to add, do we? Okay, great. So Anton, you're up.
We had an EDA meeting last night, and we got a few updates. There was a sale of a business park lot at the end of the year, January. It was either end, I don't know when it actually closed in January, which is great. So one more of those is gone. And now it sounds like with housing that's the housing projects over on Second. Sounds like, well, a couple things. One, that they're not there yet, and now they're waiting for warmer weather instead of, I thought it was construction and something, and like road construction, and now they're just waiting for warmer weather.
Yeah,
So
road
they're saying
restrictions.
sometime in April.
Road restrictions and highway.
Oh, high winds. Road restrictions in the middle of winter.
I think they were maybe waiting for them to not have any, but they also stopped because it got cold.
Yeah.
So
So anyway, but they are gonna do 8 up there now instead of the original 7 that was talked about. It was supposed to be 4 now and then 3, and now they're saying there is 4 and 4. There also is a funding snafu, and so there is going to be an ask of the city council because of the way that we worded our commitment.
Yeah.
It was worded, the county's was more big, or more free, I guess, in their wording. But the council said that we would commit a particular amount of dollars per house. And what they want, they're not asking for any more money. They're asking for a change in the wording so that they can use the dollars we have allocated to spread it out into the median, 80% median income homes, and then would be less money available for the 115% of AMI. Is it AMI? No, median income, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
And then, so that's gonna happen, but Cliff is gonna come from One Roof and talk about that, and then they're kind of like, but the upside is we're gonna be able to do one more house. So,
Doesn't really sound like a snafu then.
well, no, there was a land use, there was an issue in one of the funding sources with there wasn't a particular sign-off done by some agency, and because that wasn't in place by the time, whether it was groundbreaking or whatever had happened, the agency that had committed, I don't remember what the dollar amount was, I think it was $50,000 to the project, said, well, everything wasn't done in the correct order, so therefore it's not eligible anymore.
Wow.
So, it sounds like they've got it worked out, like it'll work out, but they'll be here at some point to talk to us. What else did we talk about? Not really, nothing else pops out. I mean, we had a long meeting, but just general business, trying to get stuff fired up for Superior National, for the grand opening, and marketing involved with that, and yeah, because everything will be open, all 27 will be open come the start of the year, so that's what I know.
There you go.
Oh, nope, we didn't have a steering committee meeting since last time, so, did we? No.
Tracy?
Okay, I didn't have any meetings, I don't know anything. Am I supposed to say anything?
Yeah, you're supposed to say
You
something.
probably should say something.
Okay. So, I have appreciated all of my time here in City Council. I'm going to miss all of you guys in this project, so now we've done a lot. I have been really thrilled to have all of you, and Dave, I miss Dave, as a really great group to work on. And I think that we are a pretty fortunate community. We've got a lot of opportunity that many small town Minnesota communities do not have. And I really hope that you guys have the ability and have the time and the focus to keep a lot of that stuff moving forward. I really hope those bathrooms get in place. I really, really, really hope we get the best liquor store we can possibly have and get people thinking it's their place to go before the whole state changes and become the destination liquor store we need to have, so we stay competitive. And I hope that we get City Hall in wherever place it needs to be, so this whole property becomes what it needs to be, as a better economic value for our community than it is right now. So I hope that with the focus is there and not all the side distractions take us away from that, because to me those are the forefront things. But I think with people like you, the possibility of accomplishing all that isn't all that difficult. I think you guys do a really good job. And so thanks a lot for everything. It's been pretty cool.
Maybe
Sorry.
what you didn't say.
You should probably summarize.
So are you leaving?
Yes,
Oh,
I am.
I thought you were just looking for a new manager over there.
No. I am
The
leaving.
manager.
I am managing
No,
to leave
unfortunately,
Oh,
no.
when is that? Like soon?
very soon.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
So,
dang it. Dang it.
That's kind of what my take of it was. So, it's been really great to have you on the council. Like your perspective is something that you know, a bunch of guys with beards don't provide. and you know, I think I can speak for everybody that we wish you a ton of success and happiness, and you know, in that next stage. But it's gonna be real
Is
hard
this
to
your last
replace it.
meeting?
Probably. There's still a chance. I have a 2-week window still, and then within a day or two I have to decide that. I'm going back to where I was before, so that's kind of cool. Brought to me by people I used to work with, otherwise I wouldn't even be, you know, I'd still be here just telling you I had no meetings or thoughts to talk about and see in 2 weeks. So this is really brought on by past people I, you know, worked with for over 20 years. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we'll miss you.
That's all you guys
Well, we're
know.
glad we picked you.
well, yeah, we are.
Thanks.
Isn't that super awkward meeting several years ago?
Yeah.
One of many.
Ugh.
So for you survivors, of course, this means now no one can ever miss any meetings,
Kennedy.
or we can't have one.
And this means that we need to get suggestions and nominations for other people.
Yeah.
So
Look into the camera, talk into the
Desperately.
people. So
Yeah, if you're watching, you probably like this stuff.
yeah, right. You could be there in a chair. Well, anyway, thanks for
Thanks, Tracy.
being a part of the council, Tracy.
Yeah.
It's been really awesome.
Yep.
And we got so much done partially because it's really good.
Yeah. So I'll miss you guys in the radio a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Not hearing me on the radio. So, is that it? Is that what you got?
Mm-hmm.
Just gonna keep these with me. So we can move on. Okay, so for my update, I went to a meeting of the Creative Economy Coalition, and they're starting to talk and think pretty energetically about an arts commission or a solution for an arts commission. They brainstormed up 4 possible. Well, I met with a couple of the members of the CEC, and we brainstormed up 4 possible structures that could happen, or that could work, that would accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish, which is basically how do we manage and encourage art and public art throughout the city? How do we advocate for that on the city level? And though the group had some time to think about which options they liked, and they chose a couple that they'd like to explore a little bit further. So that's just kind of an update on that. The Creative Economy Group is going to continue to explore those options, and then given some time, they'll bring some suggestions to the council. So that's going to be upcoming. I had a meeting with some of the emergency management folks around town. There's going to be the emergency management conference in April. Is that right? I'll look at Jim because I think he sent out the email. Sent out an email about it. They're going to have the emergency management conference I think that might be in March, and then the next month in April we're going to have another one of the cross-border activities up in Grand Portage that I'm going to go to because I'm the public information officer for the city in certain situations, and that's kind of an interesting update too, because at that meeting it sounds like the head of Ontario, whatever, the minister of Ontario or whatever, is going to be at that meeting to sign a resolution that makes it official that they can work across the border with our emergency services, which hasn't been in place before. Like, we allow them to work across the border with us, but we can't work across the border with them. And so if they sign that, that's actually a really big deal, because that means that for forest fires and emergencies and stuff like that and disasters, then our emergency services can assist their emergency services, which is great. This week I sat in on a meeting a PUC meeting where the head honchos from SIMPA came and listened to the Nordic Nature Group give their presentation about climate change. It was really great that those guys came up and and attended that meeting and listened to the Nordic Nature Group's presentation. It was pretty clear, though, that they're not that interested in entertaining positive change in the way that they generate energy and distribute it. So the Nordic Nature Group and I we're gonna be working on some other options of ways to talk to SIMPA and SIMPA members to try and educate them a little bit more about why this is a big deal to us. And so we'll be working on that. There were some conversations that I heard around town and in emails that I received that were talking about a consideration of vacation rentals on the first level of downtown buildings, or maybe like a moratorium on them or a restriction on them of some sort. That's something that I believe is going to be handled more directly by the planning and zoning, so I won't spend much time on it. But just so you guys know, there has been conversation going on about that. I sat in on the first YMCA advisory board meeting as well. That was quite a while ago. And it just was mainly like an introductory meeting to look through the strategic plan. I'm not sure that I can be on that board, though, because the YMCA advisory board, because I teach a class there, and that's one of the policies of the Y, that if you work there, you can't be on the advisory board. So we're gonna put Kennedy on that board because he's not here.
The classic, you don't show up.
No, honestly, if you want to do it, you should do it. I know you don't want to do it, but should you do it?
Well, I would like to do it. I don't.
Just like once a month. If
Let's
you
get Tim on there, and then we'll get 2 more people on here, and we'll be in good shape. We'll put them on there.
Okay, so we're just gonna put Tim on there. Should we
Perfect.
move? Or should we just do it?
All right.
It looks like everybody agrees.
Okay. So Tim is now the advisory board person. I think this is the first time I've done that in like 3 years. Where I've
Degree.
nominated somebody.
Feels
who's
good, doesn't it?
It's power.
Yeah.
So last thing that I have was just a question about comp plan update. If you've got anything for us on that.
I don't have a timeline for you. I spoke to Antonio yesterday,
Cool.
and they are, well, the last thing that we did was the steering committee met and looked over a series of different data and quote ideas from our engagement that we want to see included in the plan, and we selected some. And so they've been doing that and just kind of putting the finishing touches on this final draft. I'm not sure when we'll see it. I think it's pretty close.
Cool. Great. Anything else? Hearing none. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Happy Valentine's Day.
You too.
Okay, we're done.